Hey, this is Joe Hubbard from JoeHubbardBassVideos.com coming at you today with another lesson. And this is the first lesson in my functional non-diatonic harmony course. Today's lesson is on secondary dominants, so with that in mind, grab your bass and let's get started. Secondary dominant chords are dominant seventh chords whose root is diatonic to the primary key center and resolves up a perfect fourth or down a perfect fifth to a diatonic chord other than the tonic chord. When used, they imply a resolution to a secondary key area, therefore they are called secondary dominants. Dominant seventh chords would be considered secondary dominants in the key of C major. The first one is A7. This would be called 5/7 of 2 minor 7. The second one is B7. This would be called the 5/7 of the 3 minor 7. The third one is C7. This would be called the 5/7 of 4 major 7. The fourth one is D7. This would be called 5/7 of 5/7. And then the fifth one is E7. This would be called 5/7 of 6 minor 7. So in total, there's only 5 secondary dominant chords that you can have in a key area. F7 wouldn't be considered a secondary dominant because it doesn't have a diatonic chord to resolve either up a perfect fourth to or down to a perfect fifth. A perfect fourth up or a perfect fifth down would be a B flat chord, which is non-diatonic to the key of C major. G7 isn't a secondary dominant because it's already the 5/7 of the key. Therefore, there's only 5 secondary dominant chords in any major key area. In order to internalize the information in this lesson, make sure that you download the secondary dominant PDF from the lesson and write that out in every key. Secondary dominant chords create more tension and release in a harmonic progression because it shifts the focus away from the tonic key to a secondary implied key and then gradually progresses back to the original key. The dominant chords that point to the secondary implied keys contain notes that are non-diatonic or chromatic. This creates the desired feeling of tension and release. One of the things that I wanted to validate is the function of these secondary dominants. So if we organize these into tonic, subdominant, and dominant, this will help us to hear these chords a little bit better and understand how they're functioning in an analysis that we're doing. If we have 5/7 to 1, we know that's tonic. But what about E minor 7? That's 3 minor 7, or A minor 7. They're also tonic. So that 5/7 to the 3 is a tonic functioning secondary dominant resolution. The same thing with E7 to A minor 7. Then if I have the subdominant, well, that's my A7 to the D minor 7, which is the 2, or the 5/7 of the 4, which is C7 to the 4. Now we only have one going to the dominant because there's no secondary dominant to the 7 minor 7 flat 5. So just understanding this sound is kind of cool, and if you hear this, I could almost write a smooth jazz tune or something with that. It's a nice little friendly diatonic sounding thing, but just using secondary dominants, I could write a little tune. I suggest that you experiment with that. One good thing to do is with every new concept you learn, write a song. The following exercises will help you to develop the ability to hear secondary dominants, but also recognize them within a harmonic progression. exercise, there's a few key points that I need to highlight before we can proceed. One is, what are we actually doing? Well, we're playing all the diatonic chords from the root up to the sixth, and then we're inserting a secondary dominant preceding each one of those diatonic chords. So what I'm doing as well is outlining each chord with a 1, 2, 3, 5 bass line, which is a very nice pattern and very effective to outline the harmony. It doesn't really outline the upper structure of the chord, but the lower structure it really defines well, and it sounds great. So what I'm doing here is I'm starting at C major, and I'm going 1, 2, 3, 5. Then I move up to the first secondary dominant, which is A7. And I play the same line, but it's an octave displacement. So I've just moved the A here, up here, and I've got this pattern, which really changes the nature of the sound, but it's the same tones. That resolves to D minor. Then I move to B7, same line. That resolves to E minor. Then I move to C7. That resolves to F major. Now, one important thing to point out here is that between the third and the fourth is a half step in the major scale. And we need to know this because when we're moving from the E to the F and we're using secondary dominants, you could easily make a mistake without really having this ingrained. So there's a lot of guys that really don't know their scales, or they just know it by some predetermined pattern that they play in a certain position. So you really want to get inside these things and understand where the whole steps are, where the half steps are. In this scale pattern here, for our purposes, we're not approaching the seventh with the secondary dominant, so we only have one half step movement. Everywhere else it's a whole step. So as I'm there from the F major, I'm then going to move up to my D7 and resolve to G major. The extension makes it a G dominant seventh, but we're only playing the root 2, 3, 5. And then I go up to E7 and then resolve to the A minor. And then from there I just work my way back down to the root. Now when I do go back down here at the very end, I'm playing a G7 back into the C. We know that's a diatonic chord back into the root, but it helps it to resolve nicely. And it kind of shows you, it's an exercise, but it kind of shows you in a real sort of small snapshot soundbite of how these things can work diatonic to a key. What we're doing is we're taking a related 2 minor 7 and we're inserting it before each one of these dominant seventh chords that are functioning as secondary dominants, pointing towards the different diatonic chords and resulting in an applied secondary key. So when I play the C major 7, and then instead of just going to an A7, I'm playing an E minor 7 to an A7, 2 beats per chord, and then resolving into my diatonic chord. In this case, I'm resolving into 2, so I'm going 1 major 7, then E minor 7 to A7. The A7 is the secondary dominant, the E7 is the related 2, and my target chord is the D minor 7. And then that continues up all the way, and I just play these little 2-5 patterns all the way up. And then of course as I'm going back down, I'm having to target each chord again, carefully and remembering that half-step movement between the fourth and the third, and going all the way back down to the 1 major 7. So when you have this related 2 chord placed in front of a secondary dominant, it creates what's called a delayed resolution. It's often referred to as an interpolated chord, and in this case we call it the interpolated 2 chord. That just about wraps up today's lesson, but before we go, let's take a look at what we've learned. In today's lesson, we've learned what secondary dominant chords are and how they function in a harmonic progression. We've also learned how to develop an aural recognition for secondary dominant chords, and we've learned to play them all over our bass. We then also learned that if we insert a related 2 chord before the secondary dominant, that this creates a delayed resolution. Practice smart, work hard, and play creatively. I'll be checking in with you next week for lesson 2. Take care.